Hello, everyone. Today we're joined by Billboard Chris, my good friend, awesome warrior for children, makes so many sacrifices in this battle, traveling all around, talking to people, having conversations. Chris, welcome, man.
Bro, thank you so much for having me. When did we first meet? Amfest? A couple years ago?
Amfest 2 years ago, I think, yeah.
I think so. Yeah, you've had quite a journey since then.
It's been a journey for sure. It's so wild to me that this is what my life's become, and that while in the sort of public spotlight, in this battle, somehow I actually won. Miracle won during that. It's incredible.
A man winning a custody dispute in the state of California involving trans. That's pretty
San
much
Francisco,
the
too.
only case in existence. So good job.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'm just grateful every day. Being a dad is the coolest thing ever, by far. Like, it's just, I love it more than I love hockey and football and snowboarding and music. It's better than all those things by a million.
Yeah, of course.
Right. I just never knew my heart could love as much as it does the way I love Sawyer before I had him,
That's right. People don't know how great parenting is. I tell them all, have lots of babies, start young.
Absolutely.
Beats everything else people think they're chasing for fun.
Yeah. So I want to hear your story going back in time, because I've never heard actually how you grew up and have a family and how you got into this fight and why it matters so much to you. And how you went from little Chris, kind of like Sawyer, little kid growing up, to, where you are now on the street, talking to people, getting assaulted, getting arrested.
Yeah, little Chris was 135 pounds when he graduated high school and just 5'9", but I kept growing. But no, I had a typical normal upbringing. Middle class, 2 parents, 1 brother. Lived on a street full of kids. Played outside all the time. Born in 1975. I know that's shocking to your audience.
Yeah.
But I had a great upbringing. Did well in school, did well in sports. Dropped out of college after a few weeks. Didn't know what to do with myself. Went overseas for a while. Got a job as a financial advisor, as an investment advisor / stockbroker kind of thing when I was 25 years old. So that was in 2001. And had a financial services career for almost 20 years. Got married during that time. Had a couple girls. And back in 2019, I was on Twitter and I came across this term puberty blockers somewhere. And I said to myself, as a father of 2 girls who were 7 and 9 at the time, what the heck are puberty blockers? That does not sound good. Let's do a little research. And of course, the rest is history. This is, in my opinion, and I'm right, it's the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history. Nothing comes close to it. They're cutting off the body parts of children. They're sterilizing children. They're cutting off the breasts of girls as young as 12 years old in the United States of America. People don't need to believe me when I say that. They can watch video of Kellen Lockhart from the Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, where she admits to it on video. They can look at the insurance data, where up to 179 girls under the age of 12 and a half have had double mastectomies. This has been reported on by the Manhattan Institute. Even Reuters wrote a pretty good article a couple years ago detailing some of the numbers. But we have this ideology, which is the source of all these problems, which is completely false. There's not 1 ounce of truth to any of gender ideology. This idea that we have a gender identity that might be different than our sex is completely made up and totally bogus. There's no such thing as gender identities. That's just made up labels to describe really what are just stereotypes. Masculine stereotypes do not make a girl a boy. If she climbs trees and plays in the dirt, she's a girl. And she's probably the type you want to marry. So Harrison, when you're out there on the dating market, find these girls that liked throwing around the football when they were young. Probably more fun.
How'd you know your wife was the one?
How long? We're doing a podcast on gender ideology, not dating. But no, I obviously attracted right away, and she's just a beautiful person, humble and kind and nice and hardworking, and I knew she'd be a great mom, and so,
Yeah, it's wonderful, man.
But
And
anyway,
it is the greatest
like,
evil.
why did I get started? I got started because I have kids. You understand, obviously, having been through this with your son. I wanted to learn about this to protect my own girls because this is a social contagion affecting girls. And I see this as a cult. It's just like a cult, any other cult in society, except it's the biggest one in the world, and it's pushed by governments and funded by governments and NGOs with billions of dollars. And it's in all our schools. And of course, it's all over social media. So no child is going to be invulnerable to false teachings because they're children. So we have to teach them the truth, to provide them with that shield, to provide them with that foundation, so that when these lies come for them wherever they come in society, that they know the truth and these lies just bounce off. But the more I learned about this, the worse it gets, of course. And I just decided to take a stand. So I quit my job back in 2020. I put up a big billboard following the lead of this woman in the UK who had her poster taken down at the Edinburgh train station. I put up a big billboard that said, "I love J.K. Rowling." And I was reading Harry Potter at the time every night with my little one. And she has, of course, has spoken out about this. And the whole purpose of that billboard was to start conversations. People look at it and go, what the heck is that all about? And then they Google it and they learn. But it also generates a super strong reaction from everyone on the left, including a Vancouver City Councillor named Sarah Kirby-Young, who deemed my I Love J.K. Rowling billboard to be hate speech. And she ordered the sign company to take it down. So that was my introduction to this. I then put up a whole bunch of billboards throughout the United States, again, to start conversations, because I have this theory, this vision that when we start enough conversations about this, that we'll put a stop to it. And it's true, because the more people learn about this, the more people get active in fighting it. For every 100,000 people that learn about it, maybe only one or two actually become really active in fighting it. But it doesn't take a lot of people to put a stop to such madness. It's the same with any truly insane movement throughout history. It's always a handful of people that create enough awareness to put a stop to it. And so we've got doctors and lawyers and all sorts of people fighting this now. Dads like yourself, moms like all the moms and Moms for Liberty. And we're winning. And all these different countries are putting a stop to it. We need a lot more work to be done. I'm going to be in Brussels, in Belgium, in the European Parliament in a couple of weeks, meeting with a bunch of politicians there. So hopefully we can get some positive progress going, not just in terms of what's already happened in those countries where pediatricians and medical bodies are changing their approach, but we need hard bans. We need this to be criminalized. And we need more lawsuits flying. They are flying. But all these things together are going to put a stop to this. The core important thing we have to do, though, is keep raising awareness about the ideology itself, because there's no such thing as being born in the wrong body. We have 2 sexes, 0 genders, infinite personalities, and that's that.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's loving to tell the truth. It's not loving to affirm delusions or pretend you're being empathetic and play into this. This is child mutilation advocates. It's definitely the greatest evil of our time. And to go after children and just the most innocent, wonderful amongst us, like, how are we even at this point? How did it get so infested in every single aspect of our lives, to all the schools, government programs? It just seems like everywhere I look, even though I feel this great momentum, like you said, of us starting to win the culture finally, and we're finally getting so much momentum. We're seeing, executive orders. We're seeing CAS files, the HHS files, WPATH leaks, which I'm so grateful for. But I just feel like we need something bigger, like maybe holding some of these people accountable more than just lawsuits, although we should continue that for sure. I'd like to see criminal charges. I'd like to see it outlawed. Marjorie Taylor Greene's proposing a bill, Protect Children's Innocence Act, and it's going to end in the next 5 to 10 years. So what are these people going to do?
So it's going to dwindle for sure, but there are always going to be people pushing this, because this is a religion. It's a cult, but it's a belief in a gendered soul. And all these crazy activists today who had the upper hand, they're not going away. So yeah, we do need to first of all, criminalize this, because we can't go after any of these perpetrators criminally because it hasn't been criminalized. It's not a criminal act. All you can do is civil suits. Johanna Olsen Kennedy out of CHLA, maybe where your son might have ended up. She's being sued. The AAP is being sued. WPATH is being sued. All these different medical bodies are part of these lawsuits. Insurance companies are going to have to pay out. But in California, for example, there are caps on how much can be paid out. So it's not going to be $10, $20, $30 million for each of these cases. But it will be enough that these insurance companies start to take notice, and hopefully they put a stop to it. We had the situation in Missouri where after Jamie Reed, the whistleblower from the gender clinic there, she blew the whistle on this, saying all the same things we say. She filed an affidavit with the Attorney General of Missouri, and they introduced legislation. No new kids could receive puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. Existing children could stay on them who'd already started. But what happened was they extended the statute of limitations 20, 30 years. Because previously, before this, all these recent rounds of legislation where all these states have banned this, in every state across the United States of America, the statute of limitations for suing was 1 to 3 years, tops. Now that's been extended out in a lot of these states to 20 or 30 years for this. So the lawyers for the gender clinic in Missouri, even though kids were still allowed to keep getting puberty blockers, the lawyers for the gender clinic put a stop to it because they didn't like the liability now that the statute of limitations was increased. So all of these different things that are being done are going to help put a stop to it, but probably nothing will be more effective than the lawsuits and the insurance companies not wanting to pay out anymore, so then they won't insure it. And Trump's done everything he can from the executive office. Now the FTC just announced today there were leaked documents. They're going to be going after all of these trans health professionals for deceptive and unfair trade practices, because that's what it is. They're lying. And they're ignoring all the evidence. They ignore the HHS report, the CAS review, the systemic reviews from Finland, from Sweden, etc. And they say, oh, that's been debunked. Oh, they're ignoring the people actually delivering these services. Well, no, the people delivering these services are the ones who are lying. And they just have this circular argument going on. Well, the AAP approves of WPATH standards of care, and WPATH approves of AAP's policy on this. It's just this circular thing going on, and they ignore all the truth. But they can't ignore it forever, and lawsuits are coming. And as we just saw in Alabama, where this lawsuit was 6 years in the making, they were one of the first states, along with Arkansas, to ban this. A judge put an injunction in place right away to allow this to continue. But this was finally headed for trial, and what happened? They pulled out. WPATH pulled out. Whoever else was suing, they canceled the lawsuit because they know they have no evidence.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see lawsuits everywhere. I'm not understanding. Do you have any idea, Chris, where the people that push this stuff, whether it's a hospital or a teacher or a counselor or CPS worker, like why you think that they are doing this, buying into this, pushing this? But what could motivate someone to do the worst thing ever to a kid?
What motivates people to join a cult? There's all
I'm
sorts
no
of
cult expert, but
yeah, there's all sorts of crazy practices throughout history. Our minds are very malleable. People are easily led astray. And the way this is presented, I mean, this is a long conversation to be had if we want to get into the foundations of this, but the way it's presented is that these people who historically had distress about their sex, that used to be called gender identity disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders. That terminology changed in 2013 to gender dysphoria because they don't want to call it a disorder. That might hurt some people's feelings, I guess. But this idea of gender identity itself, that terminology was first coined by a man named Robert Stoller back in the 60s. A lot of people know about John Money, who experimented on this poor little boy who lost his penis in a circumcision gone wrong. This device malfunctioned and burned it right off. So somehow these two parents from Winnipeg, Manitoba and Canada, saw some advertisement for John Money and this research he was doing, and they got in touch with him. And together they all decided to raise this little boy as a girl, not telling him he was really a boy. And John Money was a pedophile. He had these boys in private meetings with him doing sexual acts to each other. He falsified his research. But really from this era, and some other crazy doctors as well, this idea of gender identity was born. And then this idea really floated around academia for decades. People like Judith Butler out of Berkeley pushing this notion that we all have a gender identity and that we're all performing the stereotypes of our gender, that we're all essentially in drag, performing the stereotypes of each sex. You know, men wear suits and ties and women wear dresses. So now if a man wears a dress, I guess that makes him a woman, according to gender identity ideology. This, of course, is totally insane. If he were to go into a different culture where men historically wore dresses and women wore pants, I guess that would make him a man again. Because this whole ideology hinges on these social stereotypes of whatever culture you're in. But of course, this is completely insane. People can dress however they want. That doesn't mean they're a different sex. And the left has taken the word gender and they've made it to mean something entirely different than sex. So normal people, when we talk about gender, and I always use the word sex, but we're referring to obviously males and females. That's not how the radical left refers to this term. For them, it's a presentation. And so we've gone from the 80s and 90s where we kind of got rid of these stereotypes, and you had pop stars like David Bowie and Prince and all this, who probably today would call themselves non-binary or something. We all knew they were male. Now you have this trend going on where it's cool to have a different gender identity, because this goes along with all of these other teachings in school that it's not cool to be a straight white male. We're the top of the oppression pyramid, but it is cool to have some sort of oppressed identity. You're celebrated for it. And so what happens with these kids? Who are these kids that end up at gender clinics? They're kids with autism. They're kids who don't fit in. They're kids with eating disorders. They're kids with borderline personality disorder, or the mother has it in 52% of the cases, according to an older study that was done. It's kids who've been sexually abused. It's extremely common. Dr. Quentin Van Meter, the former president of the American College of Pediatrics, the good pediatric body, the much smaller one, but it's the good one, he estimates about 60% of these kids have had sexual abuse. And there's always something else going on. According to the Gender Identity Development Service in the Tavistock in the UK, the biggest gender clinic in the world that's now shut down, 70% of those kids had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities, but they don't treat them. This started off in the Netherlands in the 90s. A girl was given these puberty blocking drugs off-label to prevent her secondary sex characteristics from developing, so she won't grow breasts and get wider hips and all that. And the sales pitch that the left gives you is this buys time for kids to explore their gender identity. But that's just a sales pitch. By the time they end up at these gender clinics, they are struggling, they are confused, they are distraught, and they just want to look like the opposite sex because they've been led to believe that they were born in the wrong body. So I say all the time, that's such an abusive message. Born in the wrong body. What does it mean? Nobody can tell you that. Not one person. I know this because I've had tens of thousands of conversations out on the street. For those, we haven't gotten into this. For those who don't know who I am, I go out on the street. I wear a sign that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And I have conversations. And I've been doing this for almost 5 years. But none of these terms can be explained because the whole thing is nonsense. And the only thing gender affirming care, which is a terrible expression, it's sex denying harm is what it is. But the only thing it actually affirms is that there's something wrong with this child. It's affirming in the child's mind that they need to be something else. It's affirming self-hatred. So we don't teach that to our kids. We teach them what I say all the time, which is that our kids are beautiful just as they are, and they don't need drugs or scalpels to be their true selves. So this whole ideology has to crumble. We have to turn it into dust. Now, that's very difficult to do because there's always going to be true believers, but we have to reach the normies. We have to reach the people in the middle of the political spectrum, really the middle 80%. People think I'm out there to change hearts and minds. I'm not out there to change a single mind. When that happens, that's fine. I'm just out there to reach the normal people who don't know what's going on, because most people aren't on the gender corner of Twitter. They're not on Twitter at all. They're not on political corners of different social media. They're just living their normal life, going to work, coming home, having dinner, playing with the kids, putting them to bed, watching Netflix, and passing out on the couch. That's the average life. People just have normal lives. And they have no idea this is going on online or in their schools, but they're starting to learn because of the work people like yourself are doing, Harrison. So thank you very much for doing this.
I feel that I have a duty, you know, to stand up for it after, you know, I just actually not just my experience, but just as a dad, just as a man in society, how could we not protect the most innocent? We have to fight for truth, for goodness. But you mentioned normies. I notice, first of all, like you said, most of these normies don't realize how barbaric it is, that they're actually chopping off body parts, that they're actually stopping puberty, which every child has a right to puberty, in my opinion, and they cannot consent to anything. As we know, most of them can't even drive yet, and yet they're taking these hormones and puberty blockers. But I find even in California, most normies, once they start to hear about it, completely think it's wrong. I mean, I would say that it's like a 90-10 issue.
Of course.
Most people,
it's even more than that.
95-5. Yeah,
like
it's
if you do a phone survey with people and you say, do you support gender affirming care? Some are going to say yes because it sounds nice, you know, but they have no idea what it is. Talk to them for 2 minutes and
you know,
they'll tell you, no, we shouldn't be
advocates.
sterilizing kids, right? But people don't believe that stuff's happening. So we have to be able to have these conversations in such a way that they understand it. I find oftentimes the language conservatives use on this issue is too extreme. You have to reach people where they're at. If you come in right away talking about mutilation and all this, it puts up this wall and people think you sound like a crazy person. So you just have to have a normal conversation with people and explain what's going on. It's important to understand the science behind these things. How do puberty blockers work? What are they doing to the body? These drugs were approved to treat prostate cancer, endometriosis, uterine fibroids. They're given to this day to sex offenders to chemically castrate them. Oklahoma just passed a law last month, maybe 2 months ago, that sex offenders, pedophiles, won't be eligible for parole unless they agree to chemically castrate themselves. What drug are they doing? What drug are they using to do that? They're using Lupron or one of these other brands, the same exact drug given to kids for puberty blockers. And it stops the pituitary gland from releasing a couple hormones, which in turn trigger testosterone in boys, estrogen in girls. This is why it's used for prostate cancer, because testosterone feeds that cancer. So this drug was designed to basically eliminate the production of testosterone. And it just so happens to stop puberty from occurring. So this is an experiment on kids, is what it is. Except it's not a real experiment because there are no guidelines, there are no rules to follow, there are no objectives to achieve. There's no group not on puberty blockers to compare them to. This is just the Wild West of medicine, and kids who are already struggling are the victims.
So what language do you think that conservatives should use specifically? And when you're out on the street talking to all sorts of people, do you find that most people agree with you, don't agree with you? Obviously, the ones where they don't agree with you get more views.
Well, views, so this is the problem. This is the problem with the internet. The angry stuff where people are shrieking and yelling and hitting or whatever, millions of views. And that's what people think it's like out there. It's not. It's nonstop support. Support. I post videos sometimes of that as well. Those don't get seen 1/20th as much. But it's easily north of 90% of the population giving me support. It's almost always young, white, liberal females giving me a hard time. 9 out of 10 times. Maybe more. So we need to reach that demographic because our education system is failing them. It's preying on the natural empathy of young women. They're being lied to in school and university. They're being told that kids are going to kill themselves if we don't transition them. That's the number one argument, and it's used every single time. Every single time.
Yeah.
By a trans activist, without fail, and I'm not exaggerating. The number two argument is puberty blockers are reversible. How are they reversible? That's the response to that. That's what you say. You ask them that question, and then you pause, and you wait. And they got nothing, because they can't answer it. But that's what they've been told. That's the propaganda. That's the sales pitch. It's buying them time to explore their gender identity so that the harmful effects of puberty won't occur, keeping them looking neutral, because this whole ideology is about passing as the opposite sex. They want to be able to pass. They want the girls to appear like a man. They want the men to appear like women. Much easier for a grown female to pass as a man than it is the opposite. because they go on testosterone, they grow a beard, they end up getting these double mastectomies, and they look like small little men to most people. Because as soon as you see someone with a beard, you just think, man. For the men who are transitioning, of course, you can tell they're men. They've got Adam's apples, deep voices, they're big, they're 6 feet tall, they got broad shoulders. So this whole argument that you're pausing puberty to make it easier for them to pass, that argument doesn't fly with girls anyway. Even if you were to take that as a valid argument, which of course it isn't. Because they end up passing anyway. What's the rush? Why are they putting them on puberty blockers at 10 years of age when they have no idea what it's doing to their brain development, their psychosocial development? We know a lot of the physical harm that's being done. Reduces bone density. For the boys, their genitalia never grows. They're going to end up with a high voice for life. They'll get this vaginoplasty done and there's not enough tissue to do it because their genitalia never grew. So they end up cutting out some of the boy's colon or some of his peritoneum, which is the lining of your abdominal cavity. And they use that to form the lining of this fake neovagina. And of course, there are complications and kids have even died. Young men have even died. But they keep doing it. So in what else in life, where there was this early study done, for example, just dozens of participants, one of them died. In what other area of medicine where you have dozens of participants, one death, what other area do you keep doing it? You deem that to be acceptable risk. There was just one. It's insane.
It's totally insane.
And again, these kids all have autism or sexual abuse or some other problem. Kids in state care are way overrepresented. According to the statistics in the UK, where we have good statistics, 52% of the kids had a parent missing, either gone out of the picture or deceased. So it's just all the struggling kids. It's not the college quarterbacks and the high school cheerleaders. It's the struggling kids. And now we're making their life even worse. So frankly, I think there should, of course, be more people talking about this, but it's one of those difficult things to talk about. So you said a minute ago, Chris, how would you talk about this? Just use normal terminology. Don't use these left-wing phrases. Don't use gender-affirming care. People don't understand what that means. They have no idea what that means. Just say they're blocking puberty in perfectly healthy children. They're giving them the opposite sex's hormones. I wouldn't even say cross-sex hormones because people don't know what that means. When I first read the term, I didn't know what that meant. Of course, you think about it for a second, yeah. But normal people don't go walking around talking about cross-sex hormones in society. They're giving the opposite sex's hormones. They're cutting off the breasts of children. These are normal terms that everyone can understand. They're teaching them that they were born in the wrong body. That because this boy is effeminate, that maybe he's really a girl. They're teaching that the toys you play with and trying on a sibling's clothing are things that make you transgender. And you can show the videos from Boston Children's Hospital where they admit to this. Or where they say a little girl trying to pee standing up or a boy trying to pee sitting down, that's a sign that your child is transgender and can be treated. These videos are extremely helpful. So, yeah, just learn the basics about this, and it's not very complicated. Everyone out there who isn't already heavily indoctrinated is going to agree with you that we shouldn't be harming kids.
It seems that people are starting to wake up and start to fight back. I'm hoping to see more and more. You mentioned the suicide blackmail that they always give. Would you rather have a dead son or a trans daughter or whatever they say? It's my understanding that that's not just untrue, but it's the opposite of the truth. And also the puberty one, I don't believe these kids can ever go through puberty again, correct?
Right. So, yeah, that lie that puberty blockers are reversible. If you went on puberty blockers for 3 months and came off, puberty would resume. You've still done some damage to your endocrine system, but it's going to resume. Not too much harm done. But in practice, 98 to 100% of these kids, according to different gender clinic statistics, they stay on them and they progress to the cross-sex hormones. And there's a window of opportunity in life where we go through puberty. If you block puberty for a boy from 12 to 18, those years are gone. He's now not going to go through puberty from 19 and into his 20s. It doesn't work like that. So that harm is done for life. And what was your first question?
The suicide blackmail.
The suicide
myth.
Blackmail. That's the proper term for it. Or it's coercion, I guess, technically. So we don't have a ton of data on this, which is the truth. But we do have a study out of Finland, came out probably a year and a half ago. They looked at 24 years worth of data from 1996 to 2019. 2,000 kids had gone to the gender clinic over that period of time, and they compared them to 17,000 kids who weren't at the gender clinic, and they compared suicide rates. I think in those 24 years, there were 6 suicides. I need to read this again, but it's something like that. And there was something like 17 in the sample group. So the actual percentage was slightly higher for kids attending the gender clinic, but it worked out to 0.052% per year. 1 out of 2,000. This is not an epidemic of suicide. Obviously, suicidal ideation is higher with these kids. They're struggling. It's higher with kids with autism. It's higher with kids who have broken families. It's higher with kids with eating disorders. These things are all co-occurring. So obviously, suicidal ideation is going to be higher, but there's absolutely no evidence, because it's not true, that there is an epidemic of suicides. Kids have been going through puberty for hundreds of thousands of years, and they haven't been killing themselves because they were born in the wrong body. This generation is no different from the 1,000 generations before them. There is no such thing as being born in the wrong body. There is such a thing as lying to your child and making them feel bad about themselves because you taught them, or you allowed society to teach them that they were born wrong, and you affirmed that message. What do you think that's going to do to a child? Is it going to make them feel better or worse? So this is common sense. Positive messages, which is you're beautiful just as you are going to make a child feel better. Telling them they were born in the wrong body and need to surgically alter their bodies, chemically alter their bodies, produce infertility, lifelong sexual dysfunction, all of this. Do you think that's going to make them happier? No. And a lot of these kids grow up to be gay. So now you got gay men who are 25 years old with a micropenis saying, what the heck did you do to me? So obviously common sense tells us suicides are probably going to go up, but we don't have data because there's never been a proper study on this. We just have that data from Finland with kids. With the adult population, we have more studies. We have a great comprehensive study out of Sweden where no one was lost to follow-up. And after controlling for mental health comorbidities in the trans-identified population and the non-trans-identified population, after controlling for other mental health problems, suicides were still 19.1 times higher than their peers. And if you compare them to the general population, they were 40 times higher. That was 10 years after sex reassignment surgery. Other studies show the same sort of thing. And this is just common sense. You're hurting children. You're harming their bodies. You're turning them into lifelong pharmaceutical patients. Obviously, that's not going to make them better. You're dealing with a mental health problem by cutting off body parts. Totally nuts.
It's totally evil, totally nuts. I mean, I can't think of any other, mental issue, be it schizophrenia or whatever, anorexia, where we try to affirm and play into the delusion. We usually try to tell people the truth. Why is this the one thing where we're not doing that? And you mentioned that it was 9 out of 10 times or more, probably 99 out of 100. It's like white liberal women. Why do you think that is, that they're the ones believing in this the most?
Yeah, definitely 9 times out of 10, they're the ones having a problem. They've been lied to. They're the ones taking feminist studies and gender studies in college. They have more friends who themselves are transitioning, so they want to be empathetic towards them. And they've heard all these lies because this is what's pushed throughout all of the liberal world, all of the leftist world, is that this is loving and kind, and they think they're being loving and kind, standing up for an oppressed minority. So, yeah, the boys just aren't having it at all. I get tons of support from young guys, high school kids come up to me, college boys. They're not having this. They think it's dumb. They think it's stupid. And they make fun of it now, which honestly is great. It's being made fun of on the playgrounds now, gender ideology.
Which is incredible.
Which is natural. That's what kids are going to do. And parents have failed them. So I think in a lot of these cases, it's going to be kids leading the way out of this. Because you can't stop a childhood rebellion, can you? You can't stop a teenage rebellion from happening. It's going to happen whether you try to stop it or not. And they've tried to stop it by lumping this in with anti-bullying training. Every day in school now, over the PA system or whatever, kids are getting some sort of anti-bullying training. There's land up here in Canada. Every day there's a land acknowledgement over the PA system, recognizing that we're all sitting here on stolen land.
Wow.
It's just making you out to be guilty all the time. That's what it does. It's not lifting up any group of society. It's just making one group of society out to be guilty. Evil white colonizers. So kids are making fun of that now too. But when it's coming from all these authority figures in society, it works for a while. But it can only work for so long. And it's failing, and it's going to keep failing. We need to ensure through proactive measures that we make sure this fails as hard as it possibly can, because during our lifetimes, we can never tolerate this medical abuse happening again. It'll probably pop up again in 100 years after we're gone. These things go in cycles. This was done in pre-Nazi Germany by Magnus Hirschfeld at his institute. And I hear all the time, I'm going off on a sidetrack here, but I hear all the time that, Chris, why don't you talk about Magnus Hirschfeld? Why don't you talk about the Jews? It's all the Jews, right? Well, the guy who did the first surgery at Magnus Hirschfeld's clinic was a man named Dr. Erwin Gorbrandt, who was a Nazi surgeon for the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, who later worked at the Dachau concentration camp doing freezing water experiments on Jews. He was also involved in the first uterus transplant at that same clinic where the man died. So, people want to put blame on one aspect of the population. It doesn't work like that. This is being pushed by the left at large, by governments, by NGOs, who, when gay rights were won, 2010, 2015, all that money, all those billions of dollars, all the focus turned to trans rights. And for the left, they're not looking for a revolution. They're always wanting to be in a perpetual state of revolution. And this was the newest civil rights movement for them. But it's a mental health disorder. It's not the same as being gay. You can define what being gay is. There are people who are same-sex attracted, whether you like it or not. Nobody can even define what transgender means, because the whole thing is made up.
Yeah, it's totally made up. It seems like a lot of these kids are told so much that they're the oppressor for being a white cis whatever kid, and then if they become trans, now they're the oppressed, and that gives them some sort of dopamine or part of their soul that feels like they're not doing something wrong all the time. This guilt, this constant shame that they're feeling for being who they are, which is always going to be how they were born, XX or XY, as a boy or girl, and nothing else. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
These autistic kids who don't feel like they're fitting in. And here comes this solution. Oh, it's because I'm trans. Oh, and now here comes a bunch of love from the online community, from their school community, from their Gender and Sexuality Alliance Club at school. Now they're getting tons of love and affection. And it feels good. But it's almost always autistic kids. I know from the Tavistock in the UK, 35% had moderate to severe autism, not including the mild cases. You probably know some of these guys from Campbell Miller Payne, the law firm in Texas. These are 4 dads who left the previous law firms just to sue for these young people who've been harmed. They currently, I haven't seen them for a couple months, but they had 13 cases going a couple months ago, and they were looking at another 150. And
Wow.
In virtually every single case, the child had autism.
Do you think we're just going to see like an insane amount of detransitioners in a few years? There's obviously the Chloe Coles, Laura Beckers, but I'm thinking it's going to be thousands and thousands of kids that we're going to start seeing being like, wow, how did you let me do this? I was a kid.
There will be. It's, most of these young people, they don't want any public attention at all. The Chloe Coles of the world are very rare. But they're out there. They just don't want the attention because it's a ton to confront. First of all, you're telling the whole world what you did, what you believed. You feel embarrassed. You've been harmed. Now you're getting all this attention. And these normally are some of the more awkward kids already. They don't want that attention. They're also then going to get a ton of grief and hate from their former friends, their so-called community, who are now going to say they were never really trans. That's what they say to Chloe Cole. Poor girl went on puberty blockers and testosterone and had a double mastectomy at 15, but they say she was never really trans. Well, they're right, actually. She wasn't, because there's no such thing. But she's as trans-identified as they get. And it also takes years for most of these kids to come to understand what they've done. They were sucked into this cult. They were vulnerable. They were preyed on. They were harmed. They're chasing this fantasy that the way they're going to feel better is by appearing more like the opposite sex. So they get the puberty blockers, they get the cross-sex hormones. That's not enough. They get the surgery. It's still not enough. And now they get into their 20s and people start getting married off and making families. And they're getting into their late 20s. And they're lonely. And they're a pharmaceutical patient. And the medical complications are stacking up. These drugs cause cancer. We don't have proper studies to conclusively say exactly what the rate is, but we know from anecdotal evidence given by the trans health professionals, and this was all leaked in the WPATH files, that they believe it's the cross-sex hormones, these doctors believe it's the cross-sex hormones that are causing certain cancers. There was one girl who developed a hepatocarcinoma, liver cancer, and the doctor in the WPATH files says it's because of the testosterone. There's other data showing it increases chance of heart attacks and strokes. So life is a long time, and you're putting yourself at an incredible disadvantage to have a happy life when you start off your adult life as a permanent medical patient. So yeah, they're going to come to these regrets, but it takes time because they're still chasing this impossible dream, and it's a lot to confront that you were lied to by all these adults in your life and that you've been harmed for life. So most people will never come out publicly and talk about it, but there will be more and more.
There will be, but how do the parents that have done and doctors that have done this to the kids ever? They can never admit that they did wrong, because to admit that would be to admit that they've basically done the worst thing you could do to a child.
I can't think of a single parent who's admitted that.
It's just
how
insanity.
could they? How could they?
Right.
Imagine you're so indoctrinated in the first place to take your kid down this path. You are so lost if you take your kid to a gender clinic. Then you agree to permanently harm your child, to cut off the healthy breasts of your 15-year-old daughter, or your 13, or even 12-year-old daughter. How lost and messed up is that person? And now we expect them to turn around and say, yeah, I made a really terrible mistake. No, that would rupture their consciousness. I don't think they can do it. They're already oftentimes sociopaths, incapable of acknowledging wrongdoing anyway. These are the types of people who take their kids and push this on their kids. There are good parents out there who are being blindsided. There are dads like you who, of course, never went along with this. But there's this destructive, suicidal empathy going on primarily with women. It's primarily moms pushing this on their kids. When the parent is pushing it, it's almost always the mom. So maybe that's a question for some psychiatrist to answer why that's the case. But they're getting all their love and affection, these weak, confused parents, they're getting their love and affection from their community who are telling them how wonderful they are for transing their own kid. Like all these Hollywood celebrities.
Yeah, I mean, it's just out of hand. Like my son, his mom was pushing the idea before he was born when she announced that she was pregnant. Like, oh, baby Sawyer due in December, I'll love you whether you're a boy or girl or neither. Which is just horrifying that someone could say that. And it was so weird, too, because she was actually excited it was a boy. That's what we both hoped for. But, we're just seeing this at such large numbers. And you mentioned how it's mostly the moms, which is totally true, because I have parents reach out to me all the time. Almost always dads, losing custody and the mom's trying to trans the kid. But a few moms, to be fair, for sure.
Yeah, there's a few. But it honestly is like 98%.
Yeah.
When there's
easily.
a dispute in the relationship, it's
Probably.
the mom pushing it.
Totally. 98% sounds about right. But the other thing I was going to say is that you see like Moms for Liberty, all these wonderful groups, Jamie Reed, whoever. At the same time, it's mostly moms fighting against this, in my opinion. There's you and me and Adam and all these people. But in reality, I see more women standing up, and I think we need more men standing up and fighting for this.
Yeah, it's totally true. So I work really closely with Moms for Liberty. They're tremendous. And I'm not here blaming moms or women. I'm just telling you the statistics on this. This is how it is. And we need to understand things in order to be able to diagnose them properly and fix them. But it's just the way it is, Harrison. It's just how it's always going to be. A lot of these moms, they tend to be the ones that are more involved in their child's school life. They're the ones going to the PTA meetings. Some of them are homemakers, which is a beautiful, wonderful profession. Nothing more important than raising our kids. So it's naturally going to be more moms with time, because dads, as a percentage of the population, I mean, I'd say both spouses work too much. It'd be great if that it wasn't like that. But dads are usually working, and dads support in other ways. Dads support financially. They donate to causes. I think there are a lot of men fighting back against this. I know a lot of them, especially in the United States. But sometimes you just get moms who have a bit more time because it's their job looking after the kids and doing all that stuff, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I personally, I have to do both, but
you have to do
I
both.
still find time, and I would just love to see more people stand up and speak out, because if everyone just said what they truly believe, we could end this. I'm wondering here how you see this ending, because I think it's going to end in the next, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, at least, like, mostly. Sure, there'll be, trickles coming in and people lying about what treatments they're getting using a different name, but I think we're putting this down in the grave. We're on our way.
Well, it's lots of little battles. It's in the States, every state is a battle separately. Same thing in Canada, it's each province. We all have different medical bodies for each province up here. We just have to keep chipping away. It's one of those things, it doesn't just suddenly end overnight. Lobotomies went on for decades, and that was just done by really a handful of doctors. This is basically done by a relative handful of doctors. You get thousands of kids in California all going through Johanna Olsen Kennedy's office. Her spouse, who is a woman who identifies as a man, Aiden, I think is her name. She runs this gender agency as a licensed social worker in California. All these troubled kids come to her, and she then sends them to her spouse at the Children's Hospital. So that's a tidy little racket they got going on there. But it is a relative handful pushing this. It's a relative handful at the top of these medical bodies who refuse to look at the evidence. And in time, with lawsuits and with legislation, we'll put a stop to it. The Democrats want to die on this hill, and they're still pushing it. They're still doubling down. In Colorado, they just tried to pass a law that would have made it an offense to misgender someone, and you would have been fined. That got taken out of the bill at the last minute. They were also trying to make it something that would be held against spouses in custody disputes if they called their child by the actual sex. That also, fortunately, got taken out of the bill. I think they realized they were going to lose.
But they took that out.
They took that out.
I didn't realize that. I appreciate you telling me that very much.
They took it out at the last minute. They knew they were going to lose when it was challenged constitutionally. That bill was trying to make it said it would have been coercive control if a parent were to call their kid by their actual sex. And it would have been held against them even if they had a custody dispute 5 years later. So you would have had all these parents afraid to call their little girl a girl. But they took that out. But we've seen all sorts of crazy bills going on in these blue states. We have to stop worrying so much about the politicians, and we have to reach the normal people. Trying to change one of these politicians' minds, forget about it. These Democrats, they are in power in the first place because they're already radical. They only got funded to run for their race because they were already radical. They were already in lockstep with the Democrat Party on all of these insane social issues. Otherwise, they never get pushed into that position. You have activists running for the Democratic Party. That's what they do. Church for a leftist is a protest. They like to run for school boards. They run for all these community positions that conservatives don't traditionally like to run for. And they've taken over all these social positions throughout society. So it's a huge job ahead of us because it's more, we have to reach the normies who eventually put pressure on the policymakers. But we have to understand the far left 2-3%, they get elected into all these positions. They're not representing their constituents. They're representing their crazy ideologies, and they're going to keep going. So we've seen some Democrats who aren't so extreme have come out with some moderate statements on this, acknowledging reality even sometimes. And then right away they get canceled by their party. So they're not going to get the funding again to run. And you've got organizations like Planned Parenthood, which this is now a huge moneymaker for them. They're giving hormones to 18-year-olds in 20 minutes. They'll give them to kids as well if the parents approve.
16, right? Didn't you see that
With
Planned
parental
Parenthood
approval.
undercover?
With parental
I thought it
approval.
was without. I thought it was without on that Planned Parenthood phone call. If I
I'm
recall
not sure
correctly, I
what
don't know if
you're
you saw
referring to,
that.
but they're supposed to have parental approval under 18. But anyway, it's a huge moneymaker for them. And we all know whatever Planned Parenthood says, the Democrats go along with. They're helping fund all of their operations and the Human Rights Campaign and all these crazy activist organizations. So we just got to keep the pedal down. But I think people do sometimes get a little too optimistic that we can just end this tomorrow. That's not how it works. You've got thousands of crazy activists out there who are never going to stop trying to push this.
I mean, I'm glad to see, though, that in Colorado, they were pressured enough. I believe there was a record set of people contesting or speaking against the bill, rather, and then they took those lines out of it. That's incredible. I know in California, there was AB 957, same kind of bill, just the custody part. I was obviously speaking out against that a lot. A lot of us were going to the Capitol, talking to the legislators. And then, of course, it actually totally passed, keeping the language the same. And thankfully, Gavin Newsom vetoed it. And I believe Gavin Newsom vetoed it because he knew, I mean, there's obviously different things. Like people say he wants to run for president or whatever. But I think he saw that there was a legit pushback and that it wouldn't be a good idea, which is kind of a miracle.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom's a character. I don't think he does anything because he thinks it's right. I think he does everything because he thinks it can forward his political career.
Absolutely. But it still didn't pass.
He's one of these people who is a legitimate narcissistic sociopath. He knows about all this going on. I know he knows because people like our friend Aaron Friday have walked along beside him and told him all of it. And he just smiles and keeps walking. So how any man can know that this is being done to kids and he's in power to stop it and he doesn't stop it, well, that's not what being a man is, first of all. But he knows and he does it anyway. So I don't give him any credit for anything good that he's done. I think it's all for personal ambition. This is the type of person we need to get out of politics, but instead he's celebrated because he's kind of smooth.
I certainly concur with that. I'm curious, though, what you think then when he told Charlie Kirk that he thought guys and girls sports was deeply unfair.
Well, he knows this is
in California,
an
it's still
80-20
going
issue,
down.
doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
When you get
90-10.
these guys pinned down like that, I mean, what are they going to say? He knows that the vast majority of the population, including his own voting base, are going to support that. But will he do anything about it? No, because he also has to appease his financiers. So he does nothing. He just talks out of both sides of his mouth. He knows he's going to reach a certain demographic on that podcast talking to Charlie Kirk, and he's going to try to calm down some of them. And a lot of people are going to see that and they're going to agree with him and they're going to think, oh, he's not so bad. But then what does he do? He does nothing. Right now you got this one boy in California stealing all the gold medals for long jump, high jump. Is there another event? I think there's 3 events that he keeps winning. Yeah. And what does Newsom do about it? Nothing.
Okay. So it starts from us speaking up, speaking out, having conversations, waking up normies. We got to keep doing that. We got to get more people activated. You know, you can really make a difference. It also just, these people are sitting back at home, never speaking up about it, not saying it on social media, to their friends, their families, scared of getting canceled. What I noticed, Chris, is when which is ridiculous, but what I noticed, what was really kind of profound, is that when I started speaking out, it seemed like speaking truth, what I believe, being courageous, kind of opened my life in like the most amazing ways, makes you feel like you're doing something that matters, like you're part of something bigger than yourself. You meet all these incredible people like you. And I really think that that's something that would just beyond, it would, if everyone had the courage to speak what they truly believe, we could kill things like gender ideology, but also just society as a whole. It'll be so much better. Your life is just so much better when you live in truth and love.
Yes, and it's possible to talk about this and not get fired. You know, you're allowed to say things like, boys are boys and girls are girls. And good luck someone firing you. You just have to sometimes, I guess, choose your words a little carefully. But if you're working in a job where you're not allowed to speak the most basic truth about the worst child abuse scandal in history, do you really want that job anyway? I wouldn't. But not everyone is in that position. Most people can speak up. And I understand this as well as anybody, because I've spoken with thousands and thousands of people who have said, please don't post this on the internet because of my job. So I have all these beautiful conversations, all recorded, with all these great supportive people. Some of them are very long conversations, and I've never posted them because I respect their wishes when they're nice. But it's not even true in most of those cases. They can speak up. Miriam Grossman is a child psychiatrist. She wrote a book on this. She still has her license. All these doctors at the American College of Pediatricians who speak out about this, they still have their license. I got a message a while ago from a urologist thanking me for what I was doing because she said she couldn't speak up about it. But it's just not true. She can, but a lot of doctors think they can't because they just don't want the pressure. But there's no one going to fire them for telling the truth. And if you're in medicine and you can't tell the truth about harm being done in medicine, I think you need to check yourself a little bit because that's not acceptable.
It is not acceptable. I feel like there's this illusion. They've somehow propagandized people to believe that such bad things will happen if they speak up against this madness. And like you said, it's just not true. And people need to start speaking up, being courageous, telling the truth. Otherwise, kids are being harmed, and we can't put up with that. So, Chris, I want you to close this out. Tell us your last final words of wisdom, anything you want to say. Just, you're an incredible, brave father, and I respect you and admire you, and I'm just super thankful to have become your friend and to fight this battle with you,
Thanks, Harrison. Appreciate you. So my message is for everyone to get educated on this, because the more you understand about it, the more you're going to be comfortable talking about it. And I say all the time, I don't think it's always that people are fearful. Sometimes it's just that. But it's usually that people don't know how to speak about it. Because there is a bit to this. But there's not that much to it. I was a financial advisor. It's not that hard to learn this. This is basic stuff. Boys are boys, girls are girls. They're being harmed. There's your basic foundation. You can learn more about the science of these drugs and all that sort of stuff. But our voices are extremely powerful. And when you speak up about this, you're educating others who then speak up about it, and it produces this compounding effect. And this was always my vision when I first started. As a financial advisor, I understand compounding interest very well. You start with $1, you double it, you're at 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, pretty soon you're at $1 million. It's the same with this. The compound interest is the people learning. So you educate 1, you educate 10, you talk to 100. Out on the street during a day, 100,000 people might see me. All the cars driving by. 99% of the conversations I'm starting, I'm never a part of. Probably more. And who knows where all those conversations are leading. But you just have to have faith in people. Because most people are good. Most people don't want this happening. Most people just don't know what's going on. And one of the advantages this ideology has had is that it's so crazy, people don't believe it. They immediately discount it. They say, no, that couldn't be happening. So learn how to communicate this in a simple manner where people can't denounce you. They can't say, oh, no, that's not happening. We've got all the evidence you ever need. So just learn about it, and then you'll be more likely to speak about it. And once you start speaking about it, your comfort zone expands, and then other opportunities come around you because you start meeting like-minded people who've also taken this step. And for a lot of people, they don't want to work on their own. They want to work with a group, with a team. You'll meet those people, and pretty soon you'll be much more powerful than when you started because you'll be reaching many more people. And that's how we win. And when we look at the last 4.5 years, not even, last 3 years, look at the progress we've made. I was meeting with some different congressional staff in August of 2022 with Jay Richards from Heritage, Ginny Gentles, who was with Independent Women's Forum at the time. And they were comfortable talking about the sports issue because you had Leah Thomas slapping women in the pool. And that's an easy one. Everyone looks at that. They see a 6'4" man lapping women in NCAA Division I athletics. Obviously, that's mental. So the sports issue is easy. The child transition issue, there's a bit more to it. And even back then, these congressional staff and these other politicians I met with, they didn't want to touch it. They only wanted to talk about sports. And look how far we've come in 3 years. And a big turning point in that was these videos I tweeted from Boston Children's Hospital, which showed everyone for the first time what was really going on, how these people really think. Because I think most people think there's weird stuff going on, but they don't know. So show them these videos from the horse's mouth. Go read the WPATH files. Download some of those videos. Show those to people that you need to show them to. Show them to your policymakers. And just learn how to message on this very simply. Because when you're talking to policymakers, you got to keep it simple. They're dealing with 100 issues. These legislators, they're dealing with all sorts of stuff. From climate change to this squirrely bill about financing whatever. And then someone comes along talking about child transition. You got 10 minutes of their time. That's the only 10 minutes they might talk about this for the next 3 months. So you got to know how to break this down really simply and spark that emotion in them, because these are people. And they have kids, a lot of them. So they need to understand what's going on, and they need to know that this is a winning issue to speak about. So just keep having conversations, one conversation at a time. We're going to stop this.
We are. We're going to win this war on children. History is going to look back, like you mentioned, lobotomies on this as an insane medical experiment. And you'll be remembered as one of the true warriors, man. So just thank you so much.
Thanks, Harrison. Good talking to you.